Brian, 7 years ago, mate,
Yeah.
you and I started debating things,
Yep.
and it has manifested itself into this podcast that has now had 500,000 downloads. We've written a book called The Intuitive Customer, and I want to have another one today.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
the first one that I remember vividly, we were sitting in, I think it was the Akron, Ohio airport,
It was.
waiting to fly back out after an engagement. And in those 7 years, I don't recall that you've won a single one of these debates. I mean, I appreciate that you keep trying. I do.
Yes, we'd just been to see a client, hadn't we? And
Yeah.
we were discussing things. And
Yeah.
this is actually, dear listener, how these podcasts started. Because Ryan and I, when we first met, we started discussing all this stuff. So me from the practical side, Ryan from the academic side. And we just had such really interesting discussions that, and just had a good laugh as we did it, that we then wrote a book and then went, actually, we don't want to stop these discussions. Why don't we do a podcast? And that's what we've been doing. So there has been a really interesting take on things from Joe Pine. So Joe was on the show just after Christmas this year. And I know Joe from years, because Joe wrote the first book called The Experience Economy that started me off down this whole route. I literally read that book and I thought, wow. I went to see my boss. I won't bore you with the rest of it. But we had Joe on the show just after Christmas. We'll put a link in the show notes talking about sort of predictions. And Joe said something to me said something on the podcast about time. And he broke it down into 3 categories, which was time saved, time well spent, and time well invested. And it struck me afterwards, and he's talked to me about this before, and he's written an article, by the way, and again, we'll put a link in the show notes to the article. And he's talked about it to me before, but it's the way I position this is, it's a bit like the first time that I listened to Professor Daniel Kahneman, where he was talking about the peak end rule. And I thought, bloody hell, that's a really good point. So it wasn't in the case of Kahneman that memory is important. It was sort of taking it down to that next level and talking about the peak end rule. And with Joe's comment, it made me think, yeah, there's really something here that I want to debate. And you'll be glad to know, mate, I chose you to have a debate with.
Let's be honest. You didn't have a lot of other choices, people who were willing to sit down and talk with you for half an hour about this. But I'm happy to. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So you sent me the article, and you were really fired up about this idea. So tell me what got you excited about that distinction between time spent or time. What was it? Time saved.
Time saved, time well spent, and time well invested.
Got it.
So what got me excited was not really the concept of we're talking about customers' time, okay? Because ultimately you go, yeah, that, we're talking about customer time, really, aren't we? But I guess it's sort of some of the nuances from there that I thought was really interesting. So one of the things is I've not met any organizations in my career that have had any measures of, and I'm now trying to be careful with my words, of customer time, the amount of time that a customer has to spend to deal with them. Okay. So if we start to talk about time saved or time well saved, okay, what I know is that there are organizations out there, a lot, and I would say the majority, that actually, and I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, couldn't care less about the customer's time.
Yeah.
And my evidence for that is witness the amount of time that it takes me to deal with a problem. And this is where we get into and I'm on a rant now, mate, don't you? So you're not going to get a word in edgeways, okay?
I'm not sure that both of us are clear on what a debate is. Go ahead, go on your rant. I'll be over here.
Yeah, you are right. What I needed was someone to just sit there and nod, and occasionally put their fingers up in the air to say, "I want to say something," that I can
And then you
totally
walk.
ignore.
Yeah. I'm gonna replace myself with just an AI of my face, just nodding, just an animated GIF. Yeah.
No, well, the thing that I really value in what you do, mate, is that you challenge my thinking and disagree with me. So
Yes.
that's also what I want you to do. Yeah. So let me go back to
I interrupted a
my
rant. I
exaggeration.
didn't
Yeah,
mean to. Go ahead.
my exaggeration is that the majority of the organisations don't care about customers' time. That is an exaggeration. Okay.
So
Uh,
there are lots of time measures, but that's not what you mean, right? So they like call time, like response time, like, but those aren't what you're referring to here, are they?
No, so I mean, let me give you some real examples, and this is where the whole focus around frictionless
Yeah.
comes in, okay, and providing an easy customer experience. Those things nod at we're actually trying to do things that don't take customers' time. But let me give you an example. I was phoning my healthcare insurance company the other day, and they said, "Oh, we're extremely busy." What a surprise! They have been for 7 years, and they've now got one of these systems where, please leave your number, and we'll phone you back, and you won't lose a place in the queue. A day later, I hadn't heard from them. Okay, a day later, a day. You know, did they care about my time? No. I went off on a rant the other day about a UPS parcel that I was having delivered. Did they care about? Do they really care about the amount of time that I spent trying to fix that problem? No. Is anybody tracking it? No. Is anybody measuring it? No. Is anybody turning around and saying, well, this is the amount of time that, on average, when we have a problem with one of our parcels, that customers spend on time, these are the amount of channels that they go down, this is what our competition do, this is the amount of time that they spend. No, nobody's doing that. Yeah. So it makes me come to the opinion. Now, ultimately, I will get to the point with any of those where I go, I'm leaving
Yeah.
my healthcare insurance company because of that, or I'm going to not ship through UPS anymore. I'm going to ship through another organization. Um, but the interesting bit is they don't know that it's because it's reached a sort of a threshold of
Right.
time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to let you say something now.
No, I mean when firms, and this, I think this is a point that you're making, like when firms measure, like we want to get our call center employees off the call within 2 minutes or something, like that is a measure of time, but that's from the employer, or that's from the company's perspective. Like we
Correct.
want to get our call
Correct.
service reps off the phone because that's costing us money, as opposed to
Correct.
looking at the entire customer side of that experience and how much
Yes.
time they invested before that call and after that call.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they are concerned with their time and they're measuring their time. Okay, they're very concerned with their time because that clearly adds up to resources and money and everything else. They're not really worried about customer time. Okay, so am I saving time is not really what organizations are being focused on. And that then comes back into, and I'm not just going to go on about the saved bit, because let's go on and talk about the other two areas as well. Because the second area that Joe talks about is time well spent. So we have time saved and we have time well spent. And one of the things I've talked to Joe about over the years is the difference between a customer experience, and the words I would use is a more experiential experience.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe tends to deal in the more experiential experience. And what I mean by a more experiential experience is I'm talking about, Disney, Lego, I don't know, even a shopping mall where you're going in and there's some form of experiential thing. Now, one of the ways that Joe talks about this is by saying he is in the business primarily of time well spent. Okay. And rightly so, he would say that I'm in the business really of time well saved. And that's the difference and the nuance
Because
between.
your clients tend to be not in this experiential experience space
Yeah,
on average.
yeah. So if we're dealing with a water utility, I am not suggesting to them that their field engineers dress up as clowns and go out and perform a 5-minute play before they go in and fix the sewerage problem that they've got. Yeah, and in fact, to a certain extent, I could see that there is a market for that. Okay, and an example I would give you.
For Shakespeare reciting sewer repairmen.
No, so think about the Geek Squad. Do
Okay.
you remember? You know the Geek
Yeah.
Squad.
Yeah.
So when the Geek Squad was set up, I can't remember what the
So
guy's
for our
name was.
listeners who are not aware, Geek Squad is a tech repair, computer repair service.
Yes, yes. So it was a tech repair company. I believe it was started in Minneapolis. I can't remember the guy's name. I used to know him quite well. He came to speak at a few events that I organised. And the concept behind it was you're employing geeks, and they dressed them up as geeks, and they penciled ties, they had badges, they had cars that looked like the old-fashioned police cars, the black and white cars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was, the point is, it was more theatre.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was, do they come and install your stuff? Yeah, they come and install your stuff, but they're also doing it in a theatrical way.
Right.
All right. Now, for me, with customer experience, we've been trying to get to just the point where things have been acceptable to customers.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know we're at a 17-year low on customer satisfaction, according to the American Customer Satisfaction Index. So we're not even there. We're a long way from when you got to that point of everything being equal and everybody doing stuff, then maybe I would be suggesting to some clients that they actually did dress their field engineers up as clowns, because maybe there is probably a market there. But Joe's point would be that moves from being a commodity to being time well spent, and people are going to spend more money with you because they're getting that bit of experiential stuff than if you're just providing a basic service. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It does. I mean, when I talk to my students about the way customers evaluate things, we talk about benefits and costs, and it seems like there's a mapping here where you can make an offering more attractive by decreasing its costs. So that might be decreasing its price, but you can also decrease like time costs, right? By saving them time. Like that's
Yes.
also decreasing costs, and therefore increasing benefits. You can also increase the overall attractiveness by increasing the benefits. And it seems like there's a mapping there onto, time benefits where your time will actually be more enjoyable. And so we can increase the overall attractiveness in either of those two ways, would be
Yeah.
interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to, if you go back to time well saved, there are clearly numbers of things that organizations already do to
Hmm.
try to save customer time. So keeping your details on a website,
Yep.
I mean, that probably has two benefits. One benefit for them, but certainly a benefit for the customer. If you think about, just Amazon, the whole concept of Amazon not having to go down the shops and buy things, have things
Yep.
delivered to you, and now having things delivered to you the next day or the same day, that's time well spent. In the UK, we get our groceries delivered. That's that saves me time wandering around the grocery store.
Mhm.
So there are things that where customers are saving customers time. The interesting bit again goes back to I don't think that they're measuring it. But the other sort of nuance that I wanted to mention was uh, is so in saving that time, how am I feeling? So when there are things like health insurance, the example I gave you, the UPS problem I gave you, um, what I felt was annoyed, frustrated, anxious, etc.
Mhm.
For experiences that are frictionless, potentially I'm either feeling surprised at the beginning, maybe for
Mhm.
the first one or two times, and then I'm not probably potentially even not feeling anything, to be
Right.
honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where then there's a, and for those people on YouTube, you can see me drawing a level here. That's where you
Totally
you
worth
could
it, by the way,
say
guys. If you're
it
not
is, isn't it?
watching,
The
yeah,
hand movement is just stunning.
it's like
Um,
it's like ballet with his hands on the screen. Yeah, it's great.
so so you've got stuff that where we are today, not
Yeah.
providing great experiences. We now reach the point where we are providing what the customer wants, i.e., within the time they want. We're not saving them time. We're it's just meeting expectation. It's then that next level above, isn't it, where you get into that moving from time well saved or time saved to time well spent.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I like that distinction. I'm sure we can think of exceptions to this rule where
Sure.
saving customers time reliably provides them with positive emotional benefits, like every time, just always happy. But I think that in general, you're right. I think that in general, saving customers time is is a more reliable way of bringing them to neutral, especially over the long haul. And then if we really want to push them into positive territory, you might have to start thinking about this, time well spent. Where can we do things to make the time that they're engaging with you more delightful, more things that they appreciate?
And when you think about that, that gets into the profitability of an experience. So I am now willing to potentially spend more money with you
Right.
because it is time well spent. The other interesting bit is, and sorry to throw these things at you, you can tell I've been thinking about this. The other interesting bit is one of the things Joe talks about is time is not recoverable, which I think is, again, quite profound.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something I think about at the end of every one of our debates. Yeah, it is a perishing resource, Richard.
Oh dear. Yeah, Colin's just gone off a rant for me for half an hour and I'm never going to get that back again.
No, he's right. I mean, it's arguably the most precious resource that we have, and it disappears every second. Yep.
So it then makes me then think of, well, so this is it then becomes interesting again, doesn't it? Which is, and clearly another one that is of value is money.
Yep.
Okay. But it's interesting because there is then a playoff with one against the other. So, example I was thinking of is I could fly to Sarasota, where I live, direct, but I can't fly direct actually to Sarasota from England. I could fly to Tampa, but let's not get into the detail of it. I could fly from A to B direct, or I could do a stopover. It's going to take me longer. And in this example, let's just assume that taking me longer costs me less money.
Sure.
So, and I may make that decision. So, although the time is not recoverable, there are compromises I make.
Oh, all the
And
time.
again, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was thinking about it from the other side as well, which is I could, and this is probably going back pre-pandemic, which is I can earn more money going and working in New York or working in London or whatever it may be, but I have to commute.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could earn more money working locally. The job doesn't pay as much, but I've got more time. So I guess all I'm saying is it's not the ultimate commodity
I
because
gotcha.
I'm making decisions about that. Does
It's
that make
absolutely true.
sense?
I think you can make a philosophical argument that time is the most important commodity we have. Your point though is, do people act like that about their time? No, no. I mean, we've all gotten lost, watching things on YouTube or Netflix or Instagram or TikTok, and clearly we are not valuing our time very highly when we
Sure.
do that. And like you say, people make trade-offs between time and money all the time in ways that show that they don't value their time more than anything else.
So, and the last one is time well invested.
Yes.
So, and that is, am I spending my time on things that are going to provide me a return at some point in the future? And I
Right.
guess training, MBAs,
Yeah.
education, that
Coaching.
type of thing are more in that, yes, I'm spending time doing these things, but actually that's going to give me a return at some point in the future.
Yeah. Kind of long-term benefit or delayed
Makes you
benefit.
think about commuting actually,
Hmm? What way?
because that I could argue that I am taking this job um, because it's not just about the pay, but it's about the fact that it's going to give me a better career in the future. So is that
Hmm.
classed as time well invested? Yeah. And
So
in fact, Joe's talking about this from a customer perspective. So maybe I'm bastardizing it by
well,
saying
but I
this.
think that so I didn't remember this being addressed in the article explicitly, but they set
No.
these three categories, and give some nice examples of each. So, for example, one of the examples that I liked, they talked about the difference between Airbnb and Uber. How Uber is
Yeah.
primarily in the business of saving people time, right? It's often a lot faster to get an Uber than to track down a taxi. Whereas Airbnb is more about time well spent, kind of more on this experiential. And so I thought that was nice. They laid that out. But the thing that I don't remember being addressed explicitly is I'm not convinced that these are three separate, distinct categories, so much as
Right.
three approaches that any firm might be able to use. So,
Yes, I agree with
whereas I
that.
agree that Uber's their primary source of value is in saving customers time, and I think that's great. I also think the experience that people have, like whether they consider the Uber ride time well spent, also contributes to the value. And for example, I know that there are options on the Uber app where you can request like to not I don't know how it's phrased, but it's essentially like to request to not be bothered while you're in the car. Like some
Right.
drivers are very chatty and some customers love that, and that improves
Sure.
their time well spent, or
I,
contributes to their
I'm
time well spent.
surprised that you
Others,
picked that one out, mate. I mean,
I
that's
don't
just
I don't use
unusual.
Uber very often because I live in kind of suburban Atlanta. But yeah, I would choose that option every time.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Am I going mad by going? I think that this is interesting, or
No, not at
what?
all. I think that anytime you can develop a framework that lets you think about things in a different way, I think that's very useful. And I agree with you that I think time is neglected the way that people, the way that firms tend to value their offerings and create their customer experiences. For me, it fits within kind of this larger framework of, are you thinking about all the costs and all of the benefits that are you can provide to your customers? If thinking about time specifically provides new insights, that's great. I think that's amazing. My only like minor word of caution would be like, don't get hung up on that though, too.
Sure,
Right. So there's
sure,
a lot of times when we learn about something new in behavioral science,
sure,
I know I do. I think you and I have talked about this, and you do too. We tend to like laser focus on it. Like, that's so exciting. Like, how does this
sure,
apply to everything? And so if you get
sure,
something out of this distinction between these three different kinds of time, and that provides you with insights, that's amazing. That's wonderful.
sure.
Don't lose sight of the fact that time is not the only thing that matters, even if it is very important. But yeah, you kind of layer it as an additional source of insights.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice. It's never, as we've said many times before, it's
Yep.
never just one thing. It's a multitude of things. But I think it's one of those interesting nuances for me. And the more I think about it, the more I think people aren't thinking about it enough. Not and then certainly not measuring it. Um, and
You one
there's
thing that
certainly not.
you like as you were bringing this up, it did make me wonder, like, if you were to throw this into a regression model, we've talked about the customer ease score and how that predicts a lot of the overall satisfaction that people have. You just ask them how easy it was to. I wonder if you could get good measurements of how much time people were spending, if that would like soak up a lot of the variance in people's customer experience. Like if I could measure how much time overall you're spending and categorize it into time spent, time saved, time wasted, time.
Yeah,
Yeah, if that information alone, not even asking you about your emotional responses, if just knowing about the time that you spent in various categories would be enough for me to say, oh, this person's had a really great experience. This person had a really terrible experience.
I think the answer to me for that, and that is a good challenge. The answer to me is again goes back to segmentation,
Yeah.
because as I was thinking about this stuff, I was thinking, yeah, and it becomes ironic, doesn't it? The people with more money tend to be the ones that tend to be busier and tend to be the ones that go for the time saving things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe there's something around, I don't know about you, but I seem to have a lot more time when I was 20 than I do now. So again, that maybe it's something to do with segmentation. But I would have thought, no matter where the segmentation is, if I feel that the amount of time that I am having to spend on something is is not meeting my expectation, the emotions I'm going to feel are negative.
Yeah.
And if I am thinking that that was time well spent, then I've thought that the emotions that I'm feeling are going to be positive.
Yeah.
Um, uh, in general. But again, the interesting thing is not being measured. So anyway, we hope that this has been interesting. I would really welcome your thoughts. Because as I say, are these one of these things where I'm starting to think about this stuff. So
And
I'd like,
we'll post that article by Pine and Gilmore
yeah,
in the show notes. It's
absolutely,
not long, and it is interesting, and they do a very good job explaining their ideas. So I'd also
yeah,
encourage our listeners to pull that down and give it a read.
yeah, no, absolutely. And if you've got a thought, then let us know. Either drop us an email at contact@beyondphilosophy.com. That's contact@beyondphilosophy.com. Or we will be writing a newsletter based on the podcast, and stick a comment in there. That newsletter is Why Customers Buy. You can join the 70,000 people that now get that LinkedIn newsletter. So just search for that on LinkedIn and get involved in debate, because it's a debate that I'm keen to have. And undoubtedly, Joe will chime in. I guarantee it. I hope so. I will encourage him to. So, good. Okay. And we look forward to talking to you next week and to spend some decent time with us.
I make no promises on that.
Cheers. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.